Well, it says we're live.
Yeah, here we go. A little countdown put me on mute, so I was like, ooh,
Yeah, so let me put, hey guys,
oh yeah.
can you hear us? Okay,
Sweet.
cool.
Happy Friday Eve, everybody.
Yeah, thank, thank you
All
for
right.
joining. Thanks for everything. I put in the Discord, in the chat, I put the Discord so you guys can sign up. Make sure that you join it. We meet once a week on the Discord, so if you have any questions or something comes up or you just want to chat or anything, please join the Discord. Post your questions over there. Check things out. Let us know what you think. If you want to make any changes or anything. And yeah, so I guess every month on the fourth Thursday of the month we have talks like this set up for you. So I want to thank our speaker Jeff for coming over and speaking to us and talking to us about Terraform. And let me turn off that music. I can figure that
I
out.
wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if I was the only one that could hear it.
I don't think we want to listen to it throughout the whole
I was worried I was going to have
recording
to.
here, right? Uh-oh, wrong one. How
There
did
you go.
I guess this is what happens when you play with new toys and you don't really understand them. So I'm just trying to figure out. There's a
I can
pause.
deal with that one better.
Stop. There we go.
Cool. There we go.
So we're all having a good time. We're having fun. We're all pumped. We're ready. So
Yeah.
thank you, Jeff, for coming to speak to us today and take it away. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. Thank you all. And yeah, usually, apologies. I'm used to like the Teams or different types of messaging systems, so I won't be able to keep up with the comments. Winston, thank you if you can keep up with that and pipe in if there's anything like really urgent that pops up. I'd love to be able to converse with
Yes.
y'all. But I appreciate everybody making the time on a Thursday afternoon. We're kind of reformatting this. We were doing weekly meetings, but we thought we could maybe do a little bit more bang for the buck if we were to consolidate them into once a month meetings, go into really in depth on specific topics. And I volunteered to be the first one to try this out. So I'm really excited to be here. I'm really glad that there is a user group for this product. And for all of these products, it makes me really proud to be somebody as part of the community on this. And so I wanted to say thank you, first of all, to all of you and all of the support that everyone has shown to this product and the enthusiasm people have for being here today. My name is Jeff Spradlin. I don't know why my name is Jeff Spradlin, but my name is Jeff Spradlin. I'm a solutions engineer here at HashiCorp. I'm coming from about 8 years in consulting prior to coming over here and being one of our pre-sales engineers. Mostly focused on the Microsoft space, right? So Windows Server, Exchange, a lot of Azure, and then some of the AI functionality and tools that they have inside of Azure. Been really deep in that space, but I'm also a HashiCorp certified Terraform associate. And there underneath all that are my bona fides for most of my Azure stuff. A little bit of my AWS, right? I have some AWS Cloud Practitioner that's probably lapsed right now, but I have delved into that, and I'll go into a little bit more on my background here in a moment. But yeah, I've been with HashiCorp for about 4 months now, 3 or 4 months, and a really great experience here. This is a great company. We do a lot of cool things to try and support the community and try and build out tools that help people check out after 5 p.m. Right? Like that's the goal. Is I don't have to stay late. I don't have to miss dinner. I don't have to work through things like that. I can automate a lot of these things, move things to the left, and that's something I'm really passionate about, along with learning and teaching in technology. My degree was in learning technology from University of North Texas, and so I'm really focused on How do I help people use technology to learn things or learn other technologies through computer automated tools? So a little bit more about me going through my career, right? In 2013, I started in break fix and help desk. I worked for a school district and then later for a county agency. Yes, ask questions. Jeff loves questions. And then, I did a lot of desktop support, a lot of Windows Server stuff, a lot of Windows desktop stuff, Windows 7, XP, all those fun things that we had to deal with about a decade ago. And then I moved over to consulting in 2015, really right from the jump, started getting into Azure and the ASM model at the time for Azure, where you had all the blades, and doing a lot of automation around PowerShell for Azure deployments, which was kind of cool. And then, kind of delved into Windows Server with my MCSE and MCSA and those sorts of things. In 2016, I started getting into Exchange Server, Exchange 2013, and then later 2016. 0365, Exchange Online, doing a lot of those migration motions, automation as well, still in there, mostly focused on Azure automation now with ARM, right? The Azure Resource Management solution that Microsoft put out there, and then started really getting into my Azure certifications for managing Azure and trying to do it at scale. And I did some really funky stuff at that time, right? Like using PowerShell scripts to go and execute against an Excel spreadsheet that would break out the spreadsheet into different CSVs. And those CSVs would all have different attributes for Azure resources that needed to get deployed. So like you think about your VMs and your NICs and your VNets and your subnets and all of that, it was really gross and it was huge, and it just caused like a lot of delays on there. But that's where we were kind of at that time. And then started delving into AWS foundations and Kubernetes, but not really in a meaningful way. And then in 2019, 2020, I went and got this thing called the Azure Certified Architect Expert Certs. They were the AZ 300 and 301. I've got you see it in the picture there, but I also have it in my background, a red polo that's signed by Scott Guthrie, the Senior Vice President of Azure and AI, or Cloud and AI, for Microsoft. And I'm really proud of that, something I still am very proud of having. And then I also started learning Terraform. So I was at a pretty large organization at the time that was starting to implement Terraform in their environments. Got really deep in the weeds on the OSS model of Terraform, and just kind of grew from there, right? And since then, I've still been doing the Azure motions. I've still been working in Azure to AD a lot, trying to get to that SCIM, unified identity idea. But I've also been very deep in multi-cloud. I've been doing AWS, I've been doing GCP, running things in Kubernetes, obviously Palo Alto in there, New Relic and PagerDuty. Did a complete deployment doing that. And now, now in my role here at HashiCorp, I've been focusing on Terraform Enterprise and Vault, Boundary, Console, those sorts of tools that are really, really fascinating in and of themselves. But let's talk a little bit about Terraform and what Terraform is and how we use it, right? So if you're not familiar, Terraform is infrastructure automation. It's an infrastructure as code tool. It's used for both cloud and on-prem solutions. So if you have things out there like vSphere or VMware tools, or on-prem things that have an API plugin or a way to authenticate into it, chances are there's a provider in Terraform for managing that. The idea is to codify your infrastructure, much as the way you codify software. And so you can start to move into those motions of reviewability and the approval gates that you may need for big changes to your environment. You can start testing things in lower level environments and bringing consistency across your entire network and infrastructure stack. It's there for environment auditing and visibility. We have some cool tools on the Terraform Enterprise and Terraform Cloud side that make that a little bit easier, but really focusing on making changes and seeing who made those changes and being able to record that in time, and having opinionated code so that if your business has specific requirements or regulatory requirements, you can go and state that in your code and make sure that everybody that is deploying to whatever system that you've integrated with gets those requirements as well. So tagging or naming conventions are easy ones, but then things like location or regions that you're deploying resources to. And then finally, the policy alignment, so that you kind of bring this all into one big happy governance as a service model And all of your different teams have to then go through the correct approval gates and the correct policy that has already been blessed by your CISO and your security teams, and they can just go and deploy however they need, so that we're containing but not constraining ultimately development and innovation in your teams. And kind of going to that last piece, how do we control costs? How do we manage naming and tagging? How do we get that desired environment sizing that we want? Because right now, I think Gartner or one of the big research companies just said that there's like a 30% overspend on cloud. Most companies are reporting an average of 30% overspend. And how do we control that? How do we bring that back down and help companies save in these macroeconomic situations they may be in? But under the hood, what is Terraform, right? So it's API calls. So if you've got an API that's exposed through a provider, or it's a plugin, we call them providers, you can go and make a reference against that and call whatever path that you're on, as long as you're authenticated to the system and service that you're trying to reach. You start to understand from that what a provider and really what an API wants from you, using the documentation that has been built out for the different Terraform providers. So is this a Boolean? Is this an integer? Is this, does this have specific constraints like, Azure Key Vault for the different SKUs? You have to have lowercase standard or, like basic. Like both of those have to be lowercase. If you were to go and do that in command line, you might get an error and not understand why. But when you see it in Terraform or when you see it in the API, you understand, oh, I have a specific constraint here I need to go specify. You have required arguments versus optional things that are assumed out of the gate that will be a certain thing when you go and declare it. So you don't have to state out everything that is going to be part of your environment build. You get outputs like IP addresses or GUIDs or subscription IDs for things that maybe you want a little bit more dynamic control over. And then my personal favorite here is the resource relationships, so that you can start to say, I know that I need to create a VM, but I also know I need managed disk, I need NICs, I need all these different things, and you can start to stitch those things together so that when you go and build something, you already have a predefined idea of load balancing, backend, any sort of network rules that you want on there or NACLs that you need on there, and start to build a cohesive model of this is a single offering that I'm doing, but it has all these different things that I would have to go memorize otherwise. But now I can just write it in Terraform and deploy it as one. Or, more precisely to our conversation today, I can go learn what are those other things that I need to go do to present a full offering to someone. And finally, once again, back to the robust documentation. Not all the providers have like exquisite documentation, but they're working on it, right? There are improvements, and we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a moment too. Under the, like if you're looking at Terraform though, like this is what you get, right? You have an infrastructure as code tool that then goes and runs certain actions, plan and apply. You can deploy it to different services, not just cloud services, such as we got Kubernetes and Heroku here. VMware, the list goes on, and you go and deploy things. You make things happen, which is really cool. Over here on the left, you kind of have an example of creating a GCI instance and setting DNS on it, right? Something very simple that you can go and build right now today, as an example. Also, beyond that, right, there's a public registry so that there are other modules and well-defined things that people like folks at AWS or Azure or Palo Alto have predefined that you can go start unwrapping and using at a very large scale. You can also manage your own private registry using Terraform Enterprise and Terraform Cloud, so that if you have something very specific you want to go scratch an itch for, you can go do that in your own private environment. So let's take another look at my career. Going back after we've kind of discussed what Terraform is, and adding some logos in here so you can kind of start seeing a picture that I started seeing very starkly as I was putting this together, right? So I was doing a lot of Windows stuff, and then I was doing a lot of PowerShell and automation stuff, and eventually got into Azure, but all really in the Microsoft space. And if you look at this, with the exception of that tiny little AWS thing that I did there, I'm at real risk of being pigeonholed as the Azure guy or as the Microsoft guy in my team. In fact, people were bringing things to me and saying, hey, you're the Microsoft guy, you tell me about this. But then, I got that architect expert. I started learning a little bit more about Terraform, and suddenly I'm starting to explore these other spaces. I'm still doing Azure, but I'm also exploring into GCP and to Palo. I'm doing a lot of stuff in AWS. I'm doing multi-cloud, and it really opened up the opportunities for me at my company in consulting, because then I had the confidence to say, I don't know this, but I can go learn it because I already know it in Terraform, or I can go find it in Terraform and understand it. So that is just the power right there, in my opinion, of learning Terraform on the surface. It starts to really unpack itself as kind of similar to like flying, right? Where you may have all different types of aircraft, all different types of things, but really you have four universal truths around flying, right? You've got lift, you've got drag, you've got thrust, and you have weight. And those four things apply whether you're flying a little Cessna as a trainer or flying an Airbus. Those things remain consistent. So this is kind of one of those ways that I can go out and have confidence to go leg up on whatever new platform or new tool I need to go learn. Right now, in fact, I'm learning Vault and Boundary. And I've taken a few swings at it before, and I was like, okay, I knew a little bit of Vault, but then there were some advanced cases. And I was like, why am I doing it this way? Why am I just, rote memorization and trying to do it this way? I know Terraform, and there's a Terraform provider for Vault that integrates really well. Let me go take that and put those together and see what else I can do with it. And that kind of built on that to help me build out my mental model of it. To kind of step back a little bit and talk about academically what we're talking about. When I was going through college, we had this idea of meaningful learning, right? And using technology in meaningful learning. And there were 5 overall aspects of it: active, constructive, intentional, authentic, and cooperative or collaborative, right? Making these changes, seeing these different ways. And it doesn't matter if you're a visual learner or a tactile learner or an audible learner. These are all different aspects that go into making sure that you learn something and it is a meaningful experience for you. So let's talk about how that and Terraform work together. Meaningful learning is active, right? You make a change. We interact with our environment. We manipulate the objects in that environment. We observe the effects, and then we construct our own interpretations of what we're seeing and the results of that manipulation, right? So I go and I do a plan, or I do a plan and apply. I see the results of that, and I may see a bunch of attributes that spit out from that. And then I can go over to the UI, I can go over into Portal and see the things that I just changed. And that's a really cool dynamic thing to know that, oh, I did it right. And so it's like a little checkbox and you feel good about it. But it's also constructive, right? I can make mistakes. I've made a lot of mistakes in Terraform. Really, the idea here is not to dwell on those mistakes, but to reflect on those puzzling experiences that you get from failure. Yeah, meaningful. Yeah, I just saw a pop-up on the chat. Thank you. So integrating those new experiences with that prior knowledge. I know something broke. Now I need to go figure out how to fix it. I establish goals for what I need to go learn, right? Maybe it's something I immediately knew I made a mistake on, or maybe it's something I'm like, wow, I'm out of my depth here. I'm going to go research this. And I have very clear outcomes from my research of how to achieve that goal based on it. And this, along with that active learning, mixing those two together, trial and error, builds out a mental model so that I have a better picture in my head, not just of, where does this live in the portal or where does this live in the console? I have a more robust picture of this is how this service works. And failure becomes less of a failure and more of a test for those gaps in my knowledge and the processes. Meaningful learning is also intentional and authentic, right? So I'm not just going and doing rote memorization, right? I am oriented toward a clear goal and outcomes from this. I'm solving real problems, and I'm avoiding that memorization thing. When I would go and learn the CLI, a lot of times it was rote memorization. I need to go remember coop control, exec, IT, and then state whatever command I'm going to be like injecting into Kubernetes or what have you. But here, I have to go learn something because I'm trying to achieve something else. And I'm guessing a lot of y'all here today are in that same place where somebody's asked you to go start learning something or start doing something more likely. Go learn AWS because we have to go become multi-cloud, or go learn GCP because we need to learn Cloud Spanner because this is going to be the next big thing for our company. I don't know where to start on that. Like, I'm guessing you're probably in the same boat, right? Where do we go? We could go look at like tons of documentation and memorize some things and start poking around in the UI for it. Or we could start saying, okay, I know Terraform and I can start building this out. These are two examples here. The first one is when I first started learning AWS, because I was on a project doing a multi-cloud deployment, and I had to very quickly take what little AWS knowledge I had and extend it to a very robust and complex solution using Palo Alto firewalls, using transit gateways, using multi-VPC, multi-AWS accounts. And I did it. I did it in a matter of days because I learned it in Terraform. Now, I was using modules. I was pulling things in from things other people have published and put out there, but I was also using my existing knowledge, and rather than just, Terraform apply, looks good to me, and committing something, I had to go learn how do I patch these things together, and what is the right way to organize these things. And we came up with a really cool two-arm solution using Palo Alto firewalls as gateway load balancers to encrypt, to redirect all traffic that's going to a specific VPC or application first to the Palos, going over there for inspection, and then using an internal route over the transit gateway to the specific VPC, so that you have a really strong untrust model for your environment using well-defined infrastructure that has already been built for you there. And then the other solution, kind of at the bottom, this isn't quite what I did, but it's very similar, is building out an application gateway so that I had a AKS cluster on the back end, and I had my traffic being routed using path-based routing. Some paths would go to like blob storage so that I can pull up images for pictures for the app, and then other backends are going to go out to wherever on the AKS cluster and go to a specific deployment. But I had used app gateways before, but I had not used them to the point where I was at that level of confidence until I started doing it in Terraform. Then I started seeing, oh, I need this front end. I need this back end pool. I need these rules. I need these specific policy frameworks in here to make this all work. And then layer on top of that, I need to go out to Key Vault to get a certificate so that I can have the front end encrypted, terminate, re-encrypt using a self-signed certificate for my backend going all the way to my Kubernetes cluster. And it's going to be encrypted all the way there, and then using sidecar secrets in order to terminate the encryption once I get to the pod. So I have end-to-end encryption using AKS and an app gateway, while also minimizing the overall costs and preventing wildcards in my certificates. And I don't have to go apply a certificate, a public cert for each one of these pods on the back end. It was really, really cool. And I did it all using, again, Terraform. I probably wouldn't have been able to do it in the time frame I needed to do it if I was just trying to poke around in the UI, or even trying to do it through the CLI or through PowerShell. Having it this way made sure that it was saved. Every time I went and ran it, it would override whatever manual changes somebody tried to do or tinker with. I had a good environment built using Terraform that was also teaching me how to use the specific technology I was interfacing with. And then lastly, meaningful learning is cooperative and it's collaborative. I seek others, and I try and grow and learn and gather those skills. I'm repeating back what I've already learned to you. So for instance here, right, I've learned these things, and now I feel confident enough to practice explaining what I know. I'm sharing my knowledge and I'm refining my approach based on that. So I'm accepting feedback and review. These are all pieces of meaningful learning. And ultimately, it makes me a better practitioner of what I'm trying to do. So enough about the academic and the abstract, and enough about me. How do you get started? So this is kind of the next fun part, right? Getting right into it. Practice makes permanent. It doesn't make perfect, it makes permanent. So if we're doing bad practices, we lead to bad patterns. So this is really, really important in my opinion. Making sure that we're following good practices, even as we're starting, even as we're developing out our experience in our code base. We're not putting credentials or passwords in code, right? I don't think anybody here is doing that, but that's one that has to bear repeating every time. One that doesn't really get repeated often enough, I think, is on the overscoping of permissions, right? I've been guilty of this. I think a lot of us have been guilty of it. We just don't want to have to deal with another error or another pop-up saying, The IAM does not have the correct permissions because we didn't correctly scope it out. But you could probably have some stars in there, but you probably need to put them a little bit deeper in your overall IAM path here. So, besides the security risks that you get from that, you lose out on how IAM will work and how to manage those granular permissions. So it's very important, in my opinion, to make sure that you're scoping correctly. And oftentimes, you'll need read at a higher level than you'll need write with Terraform. So you're going to be reading other things and pulling in data from other places. You're not going to be writing as much except for explicit things. So it behooves you to try and improve that and try and build out on that. And then the last one here, I've got it in purple, is writing everything twice or using wet code. Up here, you see I've got a bucket that I've hard-coded the attribute in. And then down there in the IAM policy document, I've got references to the ARN path for that bucket. Don't do this, right? Like, there's better ways to do it. You can reference the other resource. And that way, if you ever have to, what if my bucket name was already taken? My very explicit myTF test bucket was already used by somebody globally. Now I have to go rewrite it down in my resources, not just at my bucket policy or in my bucket itself at the top. I guess I should have highlighted that one. Those are all places where we can reuse attributes that are being spit out by a resource. So it'd be like AWS _S3 _ bucket.example .arn, and then you'd have like the ARN path. And you can very easily get that to apply and get that to propagate across multiple resources. The other thing that does is it sets an implicit dependency, so that if I go and deploy this right now, it doesn't know that I have to create the S3 bucket first. But if I go out and state that resource path or that address, automatically Terraform knows I can't even start thinking about doing this IAM policy document or the S3 bucket policy until I've got the S3 bucket deployed. And think about all the places where we've had to go, declare explicit dependencies on things without stitching them together like that. It really does remove a lot of the headaches from the things that we have to do day in and day out. The next thing I would talk about is, reading up on the providers. So if you're going to go explore a new cloud or a new service or something new that's out there, how do I authenticate? That's probably the first one, is how do I get in here? How do I make sure that I'm connecting to the right service and system without storing credentials in my code? How do I secure those credentials, right? We've got a lot of cool things in Terraform Enterprise that do that, and Terraform Cloud that you can do that. But how do I want to secure my code or my credentials? And how would other people opt to use my code, right? Going back to that collaborative step. How would other people be able to contribute to this or use it once I have it to a good place? And those are all really the first things I think about. And then I start delving into the resources I can create. Oh, I can go do a cognitive thing over here, or oh, I can go build a spanner on this, this provider, or what am I going to go eventually do, and how do I stitch all those things together? What are the possibilities? And then finally, what are the examples? So you're going to see a lot of examples and a lot of documentation when you go to registry.terraform.io. You can go through and look at all of our different providers, and you can see what are the different examples of things people have written together. And it's a really great place to kind of kickstart. I'm going to tell you a secret. A lot of my code I've taken first. I'll get the formatting and blocking from the examples. Then I'll go and add a whole bunch of things I know I need to add in there. But it's a great first step, and it saves me a lot of key clicks. And then over here I've got an example of what the registry looks like, but underneath what the two different providers that I'm talking to right now, and some of the things I'm experimenting with, and how you can get there. There's a lot of different ways you can auth into things like AWS. In here I've got assume role, so that I'm assuming a role of a service rather than creating an explicit user. And then on boundary, I'm actually connecting back to Vault. And so I'm pulling an attribute out of my HCP Vault instance to go authenticate to HCP boundary. That way I have no trust between all my services, because the only trust that exists is between HCP and my Terraform Cloud instance, or Terraform Cloud environment. So they trust each other, and they trust whether they're off of people getting in there in the correct RBAC. But I mean, I can't just go and deploy into boundary. I don't have a username and password to go do that. For myself, I've got it stored and rotated off on the side. So just different ways that you can go do that and really create really mature code patterns for future growth. And then finally, you got to pick something, right? I like this saying: aim small, miss small, right? You may be aiming at a button on the redcoat's jacket. Even if you miss that button, you're going to still hit the redcoat, right? It's from the Patriot. Look toward those current manual workloads that you have, those really manual low-hanging fruit things that you have to go do day in and day out. It may be provisioning storage a certain way where you have to make sure TLS 1.2 is turned on. Or maybe you're going through and you have to go build a new server every few weeks for people. Those are really great examples to go, let's move this to the left. Let's get really specific on the standards we need to have for it. And then, let's go build it correctly. Using the examples, we talked about that a little bit. Review the required arguments. I've kind of got the list of arguments here for, I don't even remember what it was for, but essentially you see some in here that are required and some that are optional. Go look at all of them. Go see what all of the different things that you can go manipulate and what dials you can turn, because they're all going to be stated there in the documentation, or at least they should be. And then think about the attributes that you're getting back from it. It could be something as simple as the ID or the ARN or the subscription ID or a GUID. But what are those things that you don't want to have to manually repeat and do over and over and over again? And then what are some maybe unexpected things you might get out of a resource, depending on how you build it? How can you start to stitch that together, right? Think of creative ways for, stitching together resource and module addresses. If you have multiple modules getting deployed at once, how would I index against that? How would I use resource spec, which is this down here, to specifically identify an index based on the map that I have? How am I going to stitch all these things together? And by the way, if you don't know any of these things, go research it right now. Go pull up the side window and look at this, because it's very interesting stuff that can ultimately automate away a lot of the headache and the stomach ache that we get from this. And then think about those implicit, and sometimes you need it to be explicit, dependencies. And think about the depends on block that you can specify in Terraform, so that you can have things that stitch together really well. I remember with app gateways specifically, you did have to have some depends on blocks in there for the backend pool and all those things, so that not only could you build it in the correct order, but you could tear it down in the correct order. And you could reference data calls to things in the correct order for it. And overall, thinking about reducing the scope and limiting the blast radius of whatever you're deploying. Things that need to scale together need to go together into the same workspace or into the same code base. Things that are maybe one-offs or maybe don't necessarily belong with the thing you're doing, you take them out, right? I don't need to go specify and build a VM every time I go specify a subnet. Maybe I can break those things out and have them in different workspaces. Talking a little bit deeper on some of these topics, right? Modules, right? Don't repeat yourself, but always try and improve a little bit. The idea here for modules, and you probably know these, is they're containers for those multiple resources used together. Modules don't solve everything. Let me underline that and say it again. Modules don't solve everything. They're great for the opinionated code. They're great for data validation. They're great for toil and complexity reduction. But you don't need a module for like an ARM or an Azure resource group, right? It literally has 3 attributes or arguments you can specify on it, and 2 of them are required. So you have name, location, and tags, and that's all. And there's not really a need to have a module for that. What you want a module for is, I know that I always want to reference this block of AMI, or I always know that I want to deploy in this specific region. Maybe I'll hard code it. Maybe I'll have some sort of override on it using a variable. But really, I want to simplify as much on the front end and abstract that away from my users. And then think about the app and service integration and the isolation there. I have this whole thing I want to package up together as an offering. Well, that's a good module, maybe. Maybe I need to have some switches in there to make determination and logic on whether I need to create a new subnet necessarily, or if I need to just do a data call to an existing subnet. And maybe I have variables that switch out on that. And I can hide all that from my users or the people that are going to be using my Terraform, because I've got it shifted to the left. I've already built it for them. Think about the ways that deployments are going to get screwed up as people are going through those first 2 motions again. of active and I've already got it, but like essentially, trial and error of getting through deploying things. Think about how people are eventually going to break it by putting in the wrong attribute. So maybe we use something like data validation to protect ourselves for it. And then this was a big one. This was something I had to learn very early in my career using Terraform, is try to always include a module version or a reference. And here you see the module version, but also in the source, you have a ref spec to a specific label or release that you've done into your code when you're using VCS. That's very important, that if you go and release a new version that has some new variable out there that somebody wasn't using before, you can really screw up their next deployment and really hurt their feelings at the end of the day, because you have now broken their pipeline. So always make sure that you're including versions, that you are versioning at correct levels for major and minor updates and changes, and then make sure that everybody that's consuming your module is also using versions so that they don't get caught on that hook. Finally, look at the repos that are out there. There's a lot of cool things out there. Kind of like this is an example of the VM series Palo Alto instances, and they've got examples that are really great to start from. This is how I kind of learned for loops, because I knew for each, but for loops were still kind of like in Terraform specifically. I've done for loops in PowerShell and all that, and it still kind of is always a little fuzzy. But being able to go in here and look at how a module is deployed, how the TFRs interact, how things are mapped correctly, made it very easy for me to go, oh, I can loop this together. I can make this work. Don't try to be the smartest person in the room. Go and use something other people have used for syntactical or examples that you can adopt and start using yourself. And obviously your mileage may vary on this. Like there may be a ton of issues open on this particular code right now. Make sure that you're using it correctly, that you're deploying to a lower level environment first, testing out your code, caveat emptor, all of those things, right? So putting it all together, right? Terraform. How are the different technologies that I'm going to go interface with using Terraform similar? These are kind of like, as you're going through and reflecting on what you're doing and how you're doing it, how is a VM similar to an EC2 instance, or how is S3 bucket similar to blob storage? How are those things different? Because there are differences, and there are different ways that the different clouds and the different services have put them together. How can I start to interconnect these things and look at the different providers and start to think of, here's the entire ecosystem. How can I start putting these things together in meaningful ways, like Kubernetes and Helm charts, or Prometheus and Grafana, or Consul and Vault? These are all really good examples of ways to stitch together the ecosystem. But how could they be improved? We're talking about the open source solution. I am very bullish on open source, and I believe it serves a great purpose for this community, and that's where it all starts. Think about ways that you could go back and contribute. Are there open issues out there? Could you go and create a PR against something in the Prisma Cloud provider today? Is there somewhere where you want to go help improve the community because you learned something, you found something out, and you want to go learn Golang to implement some new feature that's coming out? Feel free to contribute that. It is peer reviewed. It's things that the community works on together. And at the very least, think about ways that you could go build tests or provide updates, or at the very least documentation, and help build those examples as you start using it and learning it. How can you contribute back and help make the community better overall? And finally, think about what this will solve for you, right? What will this solve for me? If you were to look at these and go and think about the different tools that you interact with, Chef, Ansible, Azure AD, on-prem AD as a module or as a provider, how would this solve some of your current problems? But also, how will this solve problems for your colleagues? Practicing that empathy and thinking about the other people that are also staying after 5 to do some of this. You probably can think of upstream and downstream needs where you're waiting on somebody to do something for you, or people are waiting on you to get something done. How could this solve some of those needs and reduce some of those long lead times of those wait times that people have? And then maybe there's static dependencies. Maybe you're always calling a specific IP address for your Akamai front end, or you need to make sure that some things are whitelisted on that so that your app service plan will be able to be deployed correctly, and Akamai will flow the traffic to your Azure environment. How could you reduce those static dependencies by having something in Akamai automatically get updated every time you run a Terraform apply? Think about the learning gaps. We're all kind of in this macroeconomic place where maybe training has been cut, and we don't have as much time nor the budget to go spend on training. We can go out there and start to show people how to use these tools effectively. Maybe you've got a junior person that's starting to learn AWS or Prisma Cloud or any of them. How can you help train them? And maybe use Terraform to help train people. And then, obviously onboarding needs. It's always going to be easier to write code than it is to, recode. Yeah, always easier to write code than read code. But how can we surface out some of the things that we've learned from Terraform that other people can go and use internally in our groups? So that is kind of the core of my conversation today. I am going to talk about this. So in my role here at HashiCorp, we get to see how enterprises are developing and using Terraform at scale, right? So these are kind of the three major pillars of maturity within Terraform.
Hey, Jeff, we have a couple of questions.
Oh, should we pivot over to that? Let's talk about that. Let me look. So I'm going to start from the bottom and work up. So apologies on this. So what are some good resources you would recommend to do hands-on learning in Terraform? Well, think about things that you already know. Think about cloud services and cloud providers that you have already been interacting with. Go to the registry.terraform.io and pull up that particular cloud or that particular service that you know. It's always good to have that touchstone, that one thing that you already know, like just an easy place to get started, and work out from that, right? Like a Rosetta Stone, right? That's what I was trying to think of. You have Greek, you've got hieroglyphics, you have no idea. Start in that one place to go learn some things about how Terraform works. There's some great documentation, just basics about Terraform on our website. There's some really rich blogs and documentation that go back years on different ways to implement different solutions using Terraform. So I would always start with the provider registry and some of our built-in documentation on what is Terraform, how do you get started with it. What are some GitHub repos that I've used in my learning? The Palo Alto one is a great one, as well as the AWS one. Since I had to go in and start learning AWS, I ended up on the AWS GitHub a whole lot. So that was pretty much the two that I've worked with pretty extensively. And then you'll see a bunch of folks have just gone out and scratched a personal itch where they've built their own personal modules for deploying into Terraform, deploying into whatever service using Terraform. Let's see, what else? I see a lot of little things. I think that's all I've got as far as the questions so far. Any other questions on that? I'll keep kind of driving on that. Can you get repos URLs? Oh, post. I don't. Let's see. I'll try and do that after this part of it. But yeah, let me actually pull up the Palo Alto Terraform GitHub. Pretty much that. So there's a number of different templates out there for it. They've got some stuff for their specific clouds. Let me see if I've got something for Gateway Load Balancer, the one that I've worked with pretty extensively. Yeah, here. This is the one I worked on pretty extensively this last year. So that did point to our registry. However, you'll see in there the source code points back to a GitHub, and you can go in there and kind of put it all together and see how to drive all that. To really go back to the next part, right? We talked a lot about infrastructure as code and securing variables a little bit and how to connect to the repositories. These are all kind of in that adopting model, but we also talked a little bit about the networking and SaaS providers. So different providers that are out there for. Let me get the correct color here. Sorry, do it right here. So we've got network and SaaS providers. We've got different things that you can integrate that we didn't even talk about, like Packer. So Packer is really great. It's an image creation and management tool, so you can manage your VM images. And then there's obviously like more robust solutions that we have for continuous validation. We've got stuff for ServiceNow integration. A lot of different things out there that kind of go into our enterprise and cloud model. We do have those three kind of delivery methods. We've talked primarily about CLI and open source. I've used that for years. And when I really did start delving into the cloud and into the enterprise models, I was like, well, there's a lot of things that I was doing that I probably didn't need to work that hard on, like VCS integration and making sure that my pipelines were working correctly, or managing my state, which can be a real pain when you're trying to do it yourself and you end up with like deleted or corrupted state. So there's a lot of cool things. I won't bore you all with any more of this, but if y'all are interested, if there's a need, is where I would say, reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm sure we can post that in there. Happy to talk more about like what this is and how it works on there. But that is the extent of my my talk. Thank you all. I appreciate you. I really do like this community a lot, and the enthusiasm that y'all have around these products. And I hope this was a good conversation and helps y'all moving forward and thinking about how can I integrate different things. So, thank you.
Well, that's great. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Jeff. Also, I was wondering, maybe in the future we could have you come back and talk to us about Terraform Cloud and how that works. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm happy to have that conversation. I think we've got a few presenters lined up over the next few months. We got some people that are going to be talking about, I don't know what their topics are specifically. I know we have some Vault experts out there, so I don't know if we're going to be discussing Vault at all, which is a really cool topic. It's like a Swiss Army knife of different things you can do with it. But yeah, I'd be happy to come back and talk about TFC, or how you would implement that in your own environment. But yeah, obviously, whatever the community is interested in, maybe we put out a survey and see how people like this, and if people want to hear more of these types of topics on that. So.
Yeah. So and to that point, please everyone join the Discord and let me know what topics you want to talk about. What you're interested in. If maybe we should get together, maybe since we have a learning guru here who's in Terraform, maybe we start up some sessions and to do get our Terraform certification or something, something like that.
That's a great one. I'm a big proponent of that because in the process of doing it, you learn, like, as you're actively trying to focus on a goal, right? I retain a lot because of trying to go and get a cert on something. So yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great idea. So I am going to actually pull up probably a good way. I saw Shan mentioned, learning Vault. Right, so there's obviously some things you probably want to go get started with. Here's some tutorials. I'll put those into the chat on Vault. But then, once you have a little bit of an understanding of what Vault is and how it works, go look at the Vault provider. It's a really great resource. There's some really good examples in there to help build out that understanding on that. So, cool. Thank you all. I appreciate the time, and yeah, this was exciting for me. It was fun to put this all together.
Any other last questions before we close out? If you do, and after we've closed out, you can always go to the Discord, like I mentioned. And also the other thing is, this has been recorded, and as soon as we end this, shortly after that, if you miss something, or if you want to hear something again, you can go listen to on YouTube. And also we have other sessions that we have out there that if you're interested in. And like I said, please do comment. Please do let us know what you're interested in and what you would like us to focus on to help you guys. Oh, there is a question there for about Terraform and Packer with
Yes,
Azure.
I was actually going to reply in the chat while we were chatting. Yeah, I've used both. So Packer is really great for just managing and updating and versioning images. But when you start to tie that back to Terraform, it becomes really powerful because then you can say, based on variables that you've declared in your Terraform, like environment level or region, you can say, I require this specific image version. And you can get very specific and say, I do not want my dev environment to use anything but maybe these types of images based on OS, deployment environment, and so forth. And same thing for prod. Maybe we're running a N-3 ring for our production deployments, right, for our Windows servers. I make sure that I am only using a specific update and a specific image that I've fully vetted and tested, and I have it all managed out there in HTTP Packer with tags, and I tie those tags back to my Terraform, and now my Terraform knows to only call and get a specific image from my Azure image repository or from my image registry. So it very much is designed to work together on that to try and make sure that you're protected against unexpected changes or unexpected updates in your environment. So. Oh, are y'all not seeing my comments in the chat? I will make sure that we not getting any links, Robert says. Okay, let's see here. Yeah, that's a good idea, Wences. Thank you. We'll make sure that we get the any sort of documentation. But really, yeah, I just went out and Google searched it real quick. But yeah, there's some good tutorials for Vault, and then there's obviously some good things around Palo Alto, and a lot of things can just be found using that, like whatever service you want to do, space Terraform, and pick and choose, because there's a lot of great stuff both on GitHub and in our registry. So, all right, y'all.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Thank you, Jeff, and thanks everybody for joining. And feel free to ping me, DM me in the Discord if you have any questions or if there's anything you want to chat about. And thanks a lot. It was great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Y'all have a great evening, and happy Friday Eve, I guess.
All right. Yeah, we're going to end the broadcast. Thank you.
Thank you.